CIA chief and retired U.S. Army General David Petraeus wants Washington to consider working with the Al-Qaeda-affiliated Al-Nusra Front in Syria. In a statement to CNN, Petraeus said some members of the Nusra Front might be persuaded to join the so-called US-led coalition against Daesh. Petraeus was quoted as saying that some individual fighters and perhaps some elements within Nusra today have undoubtedly joined for opportunistic rather than ideological reasons. They saw Nusra as a strong horse and they haven't seen a credible alternative, as the moderate opposition has yet to be adequately resourced. Let's now speak to Caleb Maupin. He is a journalist and youth organizer with the International Action Center. Caleb, could you see a scenario where the US is working side by side with Al-Qaeda affiliates?
Well, in this instance, it seems blatantly obvious that the United States is aligned with Takfiri extremist groups. That has been the case for a long time. And while the U.S. claims to oppose ISIS, we now have the voice of David Petraeus advocating support for the Al-Nusra Front, continued support, that is, because the U.S. has been supporting the Al-Nusra Front for a long time. But what's the difference between the two organizations? They both seek to create an Islamic caliphate. They both seek to persecute Alawites and Christians in Syria. They both ultimately seek to wage war against religious minorities and persecute people, and they both seek to overthrow the Syrian Arab Republic. What's the difference?
Sorry to stop you there, Caleb, but just to rephrase my question, do you think that it will be publicly accepted in Washington and the United States that they will be working with a terrorist organization?
Well, unfortunately, I think the U.S. media does a very good job of concealing the situation in Syria from the U.S. public. The U.S. public doesn't understand what's taking place there. Whenever the U.S. media describes the situation in Syria, they try to make it very, very complicated. They talk about this faction fighting against this faction, and it's not that complicated. We have Takfiri extremists that are bent on persecuting people and murdering people, fighting the legitimate government. However, that narrative is never allowed to enter U.S. discourse, and instead we're told it's very confusing and that the U.S. is just trying to bring peace and stability. We're given a false narrative. If the U.S. media did its job, there would be outrage because the U.S. public would not support the funding of Al-Qaeda or terrorist organizations.
Let's say Petraeus' plan is executed. What results could we see on the ground in Syria?
Well, the result would be further chaos, which is the goal, it seems to be, of the U.S. in the region. The result would be further sectarian violence, factions killing each other and battling each other, and extreme instability in Syria that could spread to other parts of the region. But this is the goal in so many U.S. interventions. If you look at Iraq right now, you look at Libya right now, you look at Afghanistan, none of these countries have become more stable since the U.S. intervened and toppled the elected government. The result has been instability and the rise of terrorist and extremist organizations. And that seems to be the goal of U.S. intervention. So Petraeus' program, his stated program of funding al-Nusra and funding these extremist terrorist organizations is very consistent with the pattern of U.S. interventions, which have only brought more instability, more chaos, more poverty, more destruction to the countries in which they intervene. U.S. leaders always talk as if they're intervening to rescue the people, but the result is making the situation in the countries far, far worse than they ever could have been.
With suggestions from top American officials like this coming out in the open, what does this tell you about the overall U.S. strategy to defeat Daesh?
Well, I don't really think in the long term the U.S. really wants to defeat Daesh. I think Daesh is very convenient for the United States. The people that Daesh are battling tend to be people the United States is also attempting to battle and fight, whether it be the Shia community in Iraq, whether it be the Syrian Arab Republic. There are reports that in Yemen now Daesh forces are battling against the Ansar Allah organization in alliance with Saudi Arabia. All throughout the region, Daesh is on the side of the United States, and the Daesh is a result of U.S. policy in Iraq and Syria. So as much as the U.S. likes to hold up Daesh as an excuse to justify further intervention in the region, I think the officials in the Pentagon are very happy about Daesh's continued existence. They're very happy that it continues to do what it does and continues to give them a propaganda tool with which to justify their drone strikes and their further intervention. The U.S. created the situation in which Daesh flourished. The U.S. is responsible for destabilizing the region, and the more the U.S. intervenes, the more entities like Daesh will emerge and get stronger.
All right, Caleb Maupin, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this.